sort of like a pilot watch, you could say, but they have a signature look that's quite popular and instantly recognizable. And let's take a closer look at the BRS version. The aviation instrument series has essentially three different sizes. They go by BR01, BR03 and the BRS. Now originally the BR01 was 46 millimeters wide. The 03 was 42 millimeters square, and it was a lot more approachable. But over time watches have kind of gotten a little smaller, and sort of the classic 38-40 millimeter watches have really made a strong comeback in the last decade or so. And originally when they launched the BRS series, they kind of purely targeted it at the women's style, or the women's style watches with white and black ceramics and quartz movements, and keeping it more towards fashion trend type watch. Slowly they started launching mechanical versions of the watch, and what I have here is in particular one of my favorite iterations of the instrument series, the Golden Heritage version. Now this particular model I believe is discontinued at this point, and you do still get a BRS Golden Heritage, but they have kind of moved a little more towards the dress style approach, and they have replaced the the numerals with sticks, but the rest of the case profile and the details remain the same. So in terms of the review, other than the aesthetic aspect, everything else should remain the same when you look at it. I personally have always felt the BR03 was a little too big as well, and it's just not about the 42 millimeter width and the square. It overall has a more chunky, heavier feel, and it's substantial on the wrist. And I've always admired the BRS for kind of making it a little more easy to wear, but I never quite liked the styles that they had until they started launching versions of the BR03 and BR01 in BRS. So essentially, if you look at the dial, this is the BR03 Golden Heritage kind of brought down into the BRS line. The font here is directly lifted from a plane's cockpit, you could say, and if you were to look at the dials in some of the planes, you will kind of almost feel like it was taken out of a plane and put into a watch case. That they have also improved over time, and this was one of the large criticisms back a decade or more or so ago, where these screws that you see didn't used to align towards the center. They used to be in various different orientations, and to the OCD amongst us, it used to be very hard to ignore, and so they figured that out, and they have evolved the design over time, and now the screws are all perfectly lined up. If you look at the case, it's actually very interestingly finished. You would think a case such as this will be very tool watch like and have very minimal finishing and be very simplistic, but Bell & Ross do take quite a bit of care in finishing the edges. So you'll see a polished ring on the top, on the bezel there. You'll see a polished edge on the side of the case. There is this nice little recess on the side of the case that runs across. The brushing is done very nicely from top to bottom here, and is a tiny polished edge on the lug as well, just to make things a little more interesting. And they don't stop there. There's a polished edge on the bottom as well, and the case back is polished as well. So it's a lot of interesting kind of contrasts and finishes that are on this watch that give a nice appeal in person rather than having a simple matte or a brush type of finish overall. They do take a little bit more care in making it interesting and have the ability to catch light at interesting angles. One of the benefits, or rather the cool things about the Golden Heritage as such, is the applied marker. So as you can see, the stick markers and the numerals are beautifully cut pieces that are applied onto the dial, and this really elevates the watch above, you know, a similar styled pilot watches or similar themed watches, because the finish on the markers and the way that they have a matte yet sort of a glowing type effect when light hits them is really cool. And they've also kind of taken the finishing up a notch on the hand. So if you see, half of the hand is sort of like a sparkly type of finish and half of the hand is polished. It's a very cool touch that you don't notice until you hold the watch in your hand. And when I first saw that, I was really quite blown away. I don't think I have seen a hand that is finished in two different ways, running across the middle. It's a very cool effect that I really admire. The major difference between the BR03 and the BRS would actually be the handset. So the BRS tends to have a more delicate, slightly more dress watch style handset. The BR03 has a more true to the pilot, true to the aviation theme handset. But the biggest reason to get this would be the specs in terms of the dimensions. So this is a 39mm case, and it's only 7.5 to 8, like somewhere between 7 and 8 mm thick, and that is incredibly slim, and it has a tendency to simply disappear on your wrist in terms of the weight. It's extremely comfortable on the wrist, and it sits well compared to the BR03, which has a tendency to sit really high. And the thickness and the sort of flat design really help the wearability on this watch. The other big advantage is the lug to lug. As you can see, the lugs are quite tiny, and basically this is only a 44mm lug to lug, and with a strap that kind of drops down, essentially this watch can be worn on just about any wrist, and that's another huge plus. So lot more wearable, lot more versatile, a lot easier to wear, I would say, or major advantages for the BRS series of the watch. Another real cool attention to detail, I would say, would be the crown, and I am a huge fan of this crown. Yes, it is a simple push-pull crown, but the finish on the crown is really quite nice. The logo is in the center, it's sort of embossed and has a coin edge to it, and it's easy to grip, easy to wind. It's a very nicely done crown, good attention to detail there as well. So going on to the movement, this is basically an ETA Sellita SW300 ETA 2892. You can kind of catch the reference there, why the watch was, at least the 03 was called the BR0392, because it used the ETA 2892 movement. This is one of the areas where Bell & Ross is sort of lagging behind. Yes, at this price point, almost everybody has either moved to in-house movements or higher power reserve movements, and Bell & Ross is sort of still using the base Sellita ETA movements. I don't think this is the type of watch you should buy for the mechanical movement. This is more for the aesthetic, the wearability, the look and the design, and you cannot have another watch in the collection that looks like this. So in that aspect, is a very different way to look at it. Couple of negatives or disadvantages or drawbacks, I would say. My sort of biggest issue or negative for this watch is the strap. Actually, the strap looks really cool on this watch, and it's a great look. It's embossed with the B&R logo. However, it's not as nicely made as the one you get on the 0392. The 0392 has a nice sort of thick, and it feels more sturdy. For some reason they went with a very slim and almost fragile strap on this, and I don't think this is going to survive all that long. I feel like the durability aspect on the strap is going to be very questionable, and at 24 millimeters it's not exactly the easiest watch to get straps for, but you can go aftermarket and find some. But I would have preferred at the price point that they either provide more than one strap or something at least twice the thickness of this strap that can really hold the watch well. The second sort of minor quibble is I really wish the loom was better. The loom is almost unusable on this watch, and it's not really something that you should pick on in that sense, but it would have been nice for them to have a better loom on this watch. And it's only 50 meters water resistant, which is another small drawback, but honestly I would be more concerned about getting the strap wet than with the watch wet. I don't think this strap will take water very well. Even like a a quick rinse on the sink will, my guess is it'll ruin the finish on the strap. So not meant for water. My advice is don't wear this on a rainy day even. Keep it for the dry days. And the last sort of minor criticism would be the price. I guess this watch is sitting at $3,300 US, which in today's market is actually really pushing the barrier in terms of what an ETA Celita based watch should be priced at. I do think they are working on refreshing this lineup with their newer movements, but I would expect that the price point jumps along with it. But if I have to be fair and even things out, I would say that the fit and finish overall has always been good. I have owned the BR0392 before this, and I've always admired the way Bell & Ross finished their cases. The crystal is a flat, but the AR coating is really good. The visibility is crisp and clear. The dial has a nice matte texture to it, which makes the watch supremely legible, and not many watches can boast instant recognizability as a Bell & Ross. And so that's my quick overview and review on the BRS Golden Heritage from Bell & Ross. Hope you like it. Post any questions below and I will answer to the best of my knowledge. Thanks, and like and subscribe to my channel if you want more content. Cheers.